Hi, I'm Erik Hall, the digital sports editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I'm joined by Steve Doyle, who was APSE president in 1989-90, while sports editor at the Orlando Sentinel. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
Sure, glad to be here.
How'd you get
Oh, you
started with
froze.
APSE?
Well, I became an assistant sports editor of the Orlando Sentinel in 1981, first of the year. And I had colleagues in the business who had told me about APSC. I'd seen information on the wire. Had not been a sports editor before that at any level. And I just heard through the grapevine, knew people involved, decided I wanted to try it out, talked my bosses into letting me go to the first convention, which was in Denver that I attended in 1981, and it was infamous because the hotel had a fire alarm at like 3 a.m. And it was After that I was hooked. I made deep and lasting friendships that always brought me back.
What about that first conference hooked you?
Uh, Getting to know people that I only knew by name and newspapers by reputation. I'd worked in Mississippi for at two newspapers in Mississippi before I went to Orlando, and my scope was pretty much limited to the Southeast. I was a sports writer. I went to games. I worked on the desk. I designed pages. I did a little bit of everything, but I didn't have much range around the country. This gave me a chance to meet people from coast to coast and to strike up a network that was really, really deep. Like I said, I knew a few people. Uh, Former boss of mine was there. A couple others I knew by you know across the southeast, but otherwise it was all new territory to me, and I just dived in.
How did things progress that then you ran and became president of the organization?
That's kind of funny. I just got active and volunteered for things and helped out with things, and I became a regional. During those days, we were trying to get the regions going, and I became a regional uh, chair, vice chair, up through the ranks. There was a progression in those days, and I don't know what year it was, mid '80s. Um, I had been an automatic nominee for office and didn't win the election. Shouldn't have. There were better people than I was, and so, but I continued to be involved, and then the best thing that happened was in 1987, I pitched the convention to be in Orlando and for me to be the host. And Henry Freeman, my dear friend, who was sports editor of USA Today, he was in charge of the program and I was in charge of the site. So that was the convention where I got nominated and elected. And I always said the reason I got elected is because of Disney World. It had nothing to do with anything else. People were happy at Disney World. The convention went okay. We had a really, really strong lineup of programs and speakers. We had sports commissioners and NCAA chairs and you know renowned people from all across the industry. And it was well attended, and I think people just liked it, and I think that's why I got elected actually. But I was very active in that role, and up in committee work and stuff like that.
What were some of the challenges you faced being president, and how did you overcome those?
Well, the first thing, one thing you should know is that when I was elected president, I was working with Henry and Bill Dwyer uh, and Gene Quinn, who was at the time the sports editor of the Chicago Tribune. They were friends of mine. They were great mentors. They were great sports editors, and other people before them. But they were the three that were principal on the ladder then. Jeff Wohler, my friend, was behind me on the ladder. But what happened was, if you know, there was four steps to the presidency. Then you worked your way up through three vice presidents roles, and then became president. And when I got to be uh, second on the rung, uh, uh, Gene Quinn took another job and left sports, and so I got to skip a step and go from second vice president to first vice president. I think something like that. And it was an immediate. I was thrown into the fire pretty immediately. I skipped over the spot on the ladder where you ran the contest. I remember that, so I lucked out in that regard. But I'd had the convention and I'd had everything else newsletter. That was the other thing I did. So because I moved up, then we had to appoint somebody to come in behind me, and that's how Sandy Bailey got involved. She was the first woman to be an officer of APSE, and we helped her get on the ladder to be an officer. Then Dale By moved into an office. He was elected in there too, and so we brought on two people when I came in to be president. So we had to put it. We had a lot of new faces. Jeff Mueller was on there, and the funny thing that happened was when I was the president, we had our winter meeting that year in Tampa. We alternated between Tampa and Redondo Beach. We were at the hotel in Tampa, and Jack Sims, who was a longtime secretary treasurer, he made the thing go. He was an AP guy, taught at Auburn University, had been the secretary treasurer of my entire tenure with APSC. He announced at that meeting he was retiring. He didn't tell any of us beforehand. He just stood up and announced it. So it fell into my lap to replace the guy who run the organization for as far as I know, at least 10 years. I don't know how long Jack was in that role, but it was a long time. And I had, luckily for me, I had several really good people stand up and say, hey, I'll do the job if you need somebody. And top of that list was Ed Storin. And brought in Ed to do to run the organization basically. And that was probably the only good thing I contributed my time there. That and Sandy and Dale. But those are the challenges that I had. I had to fill one guy stepped off the ladder. I had to be one behind me, and then the executive secretary quit. So it was interesting.
What do you remember about the process of selecting Sandy Bailey to be in office for APSE?
Well, I'd known Sandy, of course, and been in meetings with her, done committee work, contest judging, that sort of thing. I knew her pedigree. She worked for George Solomon at the Washington Post at the time. She had come up from Tampa, I think. She had her Florida roots, like a lot of people did. But she just was a really good candidate. And I thought it was really important at that point in time for APSE to diversify. Every face that had run that organization up to me had been a white male. And there's nothing wrong with white males. I've enjoyed being one in my lifetime. But, it's we were at the time where sports stats were changing, where the industry was changing. We helped give seed money to Austin to get them going that when I was president and for a few years there before and after. So it was a time when we wanted to invest in diversifying the industry. All of us in our newsrooms are trying to do that. And this was an opportunity, and Sandy was the best candidate to help us with that. And I'm not saying she was chosen simply because of that. I'm saying she was a great candidate, and everybody liked the choice. So it was not a difficult choice, but it was a consideration.
Yeah. What do you remember about some of the conferences around the time when you were president, and how those went?
We had some wonderful conferences. In 1983, we had an pre-Olympic conference in Los Angeles that was just amazing. We went all over the city and looked at all kinds of venues and got to meet a lot of the people putting on the Olympics. That was my first as a journalist. I was pretty young. I was one of the youngest presidents of APSC when I got elected. Maybe the youngest before, except outside of Dave Smith, I might have been the youngest of all time before since Dave. But and so I was getting exposed to a lot of people and events and things that I hadn't been exposed to. And the Olympics were in LA. It was quite an undertaking. It was all of our newspaper companies were investing in it heavily, putting together teams of reporters and assigning coordinating editors and doing all this amazing stuff. So that convention was really amazing in that regard because it really we get immersed in the Olympic situation. I was active in the Olympics for several years, Olympic Committee for several years after that, and found that very useful. The other thing was we had one of the most amazing awards banquets that year, being Los Angeles. Bill Dwyer and Dave Moylan and John Sherva and all those people in the play time brought in a lot of quasi-celebrities to the event. We had a celebrity at each table. People like Delta Burke, who's an actor who you probably wouldn't know. She's a pretty famous TV actor after that, but she was on her way up at the time. Bruce Penhall was the guy I take was a motorcycle racer who became an actor and did a lot of but punch and sex movies, I guess. He would get he was kind of like a pretty boy, and there were a lot of different people there like that. They wasn't anybody really famous secondary actors, but they had one at every table. Tommy Lasorda was the speaker. He put on a funny speech, and I remember that Blackstone, the magician, was there, and he did a bit with Dave Moylan where he took his shirt off through the middle under his suit jacket. So it was just a lot of fun. So that convention was kind of the first really big show I attended. 1986, we went to Phoenix, and I think spent so much money at the Biltmore Hotel there that we pretty much broke the organization. We had to go through a huge financial restructuring after that. Henry Freeman was the guy who orchestrated all that, kind of put APSE on sound financial footing at the time. But I don't know all the details. I wasn't an officer at the time, but I just know we spent a lot of money on that Phoenix. We had cabanas and bars everywhere. I don't know. It was 107 degrees when we played golf. I remember that too. But that was a good convention. But after that, I think we were pretty professional. I think every year we tried to make the convention better. But we attracted the top people from the sports industry, and we tried to put on fun events. We tried to make it cost effective. We tried to recruit people to attend from the regions. We moved it around the country very, very consistently, and I think it was important to get a lot of people involved in smaller papers by doing things regionally. An odd thing that happened during my convention out in when I was in charge of the program at Portland. Jeff Wooler was the site chair, and I was the program chair. And that was when the National Sports Daily, the newspaper, from Frank DeFord, started, was beginning to ramp up its hiring. And they were hiring people from all across the country, and big name stars, big name columnists, sports editors at all kinds of papers. It was just Van McKenzie from Atlanta went up there. Vince Doria from Boston ended up there. A lot of big names journalists wound up there. And so at that time, when we put together a convention, we would always have two programs at a time. That might be one about writing game stories, and one might have an interview with, I don't know, some Olympic officials, things like that. We'd have two at a time for most time slots. Well, we did a program on the national and what it was all about, because there was so much curiosity and interest in it. And then I forgot what the other program was up against it, but I felt, but it was something pretty mundane. And when I went to the room, there was like three people putting on the program in one room, like one person in the audience. Everybody else was in the other room. So I felt kind of bad about that. Somebody had suggested I might want to make a schedule change. I said, nah, it'll be all right. What's wrong? That was interesting. But it was a good convention overall, and it didn't rain in Portland, which was a stunning thing that happened. But the national was like the overarching discussion for the whole convention. And the year I was president, I'll say this year I was president, we were in Boston. And on the Friday night of my presidency, there were two no-hitters at the same time.
That's exciting.
Dave Stewart and John Candelaria.
What were you talked about the national a little bit. Was that one of the bigger challenges maybe facing the industry at that time?
It was. I mean, they were scraping a lot of talent off the top, and it was a glorious concept. If it hadn't been for the things that brought down a lot of newspapers, printing schedules and delivery schedules, success was a huge artistic success. If you look at what the Athletic launched as for web sports service, they were very similar. Athletic didn't have to worry about printing and delivery and regional editions, but otherwise they came through and hired the best people and tried to have local presences in every market. They did big grandiose things. There was no idea that was too was too big for the tent, and it was a marvelous thing. Now, somewhere in a box, I have a lot of copies of the National, because it was just the two biggest things that happened in sports journalism in my career: first USA Today, and then the National. Those two things changed the culture of Beast. Everybody else followed those two. I always told Henry Freeman that he had quite a legacy. That he changed the way people viewed sports journalism and created so many new elements, statistical elements, and things like that that changed the way that we approach things. And the National did the same thing on a different, on more of maybe an artistic scale than USA Today did. But they were both very influential.
Were there ways you changed the Orlando Sentinel because of those two publications?
Oh yeah. Uh, Everybody changed their newspapers because USA Today, because they looked at the way they did statistics and length of stories and scope of stories and immediacy. I mean, USA Today, when it launched, had a window that every story had to have a 48-hour window. They didn't go beyond 48 hours ahead or 48 hours behind, basically. Ongoing stories, notwithstanding, of course, but on a routine basis. And I think we all looked at the immediacy and how we developed ideas. Obviously, it changed the appetite for every piece of agate that AP produced. I mean, before, what was considered a box score was not a box score. We all wanted a big fancy box scores, and it changed the way we package statistics, type sizes, typography, use of color. Uh, I can't think of a way it didn't touch on what we did in some small way. Now, people made fun of USA Today, incorrectly, in my opinion. Calling it a big paper and everything like that. But it was a concept. As a concept, it had a plan, and it stuck to the plan, and it did well. You may not agree with everything it did, but you had to admire the professionalism, the thought that went into it, and the approach they took to it, and the talent that they had on the staff. They had a very talented staff. USA Today did, before the National, USA Today went across the country and skimmed the top of all the Gannett papers and took people from that I worked with in Jackson, Mississippi, which was not a Gannett paper when I worked there. It was a family-owned paper, but became a Gannett paper right after I left. It took people from I worked with there to Washington, and you know, coast to coast, people, they took the best people and from Gannett and made them, put them in the niches, created beats, set standards. I mean, obviously the New York Times had Red Smith and Dave Anderson, and the Los Angeles Times had Jim Murray, and Chicago Tribune had great columnists. That there was great journals and sports journalism going on already, but it just changed the way you looked at it. It wasn't, you had to think outside the box because you wanted to compete with it. You wanted to learn from it and compete with it. And didn't want, I lived in Orlando as a tourism market. So USA Today is built for a tourism market world. I didn't want them to come into my market and beat me on my stories because I was competing against them. They were head-to-head competitors for us at newsstands all across airports and hotels. And we had a lot of hotel rooms, and we had a lot of hotel room delivery programs. USA Today wanted all of those. So it was, for me, it was kind of a personal competition. Yeah, that changed a lot of it, a lot of the way we thought. The National changed kind of the scope of ideas, and the creativity of ideas. Van McKenzie was one of the greatest sports editors of all time, not because he was a great writer, but he was a great idea person. He knew how to empower people to execute those ideas, and he took a lot of that creativity he had in St. Petersburg and the New York Daily News and Atlanta, and went to the National as managing editor and set about. It was a blank slate for him. He could invent anything he wanted to invent, as long as he could figure out how to do it. He could do it, and that was an inspiration because it helped all of us at below that level or aspiring to that level to see that vision, to think about things in a bigger and more granular way. And we didn't have the talent on our staffs he had, but it was helpful and as a guidepost. Plus, then unfortunately, after the National didn't make it, its couple of years it was around, there was a lot of talented people looking for jobs, and I was able to hire a couple of them too. So there was that feeder system that moved back around. They were getting paid. Some of them were getting paid for the national, but still, but they needed jobs. So I had two or three.
What are you most proud of from your time in leadership of APSE?
Oh man, uh, I think that we tried to run the organization very professionally. I think every year I was in the APSC, that we all invested a little heavily into doing things at a higher level. Uh, and that was small things. The newsletter got better, regional meetings got better, recruiting of membership got better, contests got better. Although we argued about that a lot, that was always the biggest argument of every presidency was the contest. I hated some of those meetings, but I think we endeavored to underscore the best of the industry, the best journalism in the contest, the Red Smith Award winner, other things that we did to recognize people and contributions. And we also, through some initiatives created by Bill Dwyer when he was president, we opened up a consistent dialogue with all the sports leaders of all the leagues. And that's, I think John Sherman told you about all the years of having commissioners meetings, that sort of thing. And he took on that role. And Bill got that role when he was president, as I recall. And that became a huge help to all of us. It helped us. They knew who we were. They knew what we wanted to accomplish. We then could go in and talk to them about access and credentialing and everything that popped up. That was still at the infancy of women in the locker room battles for that, and equal access for people. And so we were able to create a dialogue that I think was very important. I can't take credit for starting it or anything, but I can certainly take credit for attending a lot of those meetings and being part of that. And it was very useful, I think, and I think it was very useful to the industry as a whole. I was proud to play a role in that. Also, when I was president, we at the initiation of the members, it was kind of pitched to me that they wanted to update our code of ethics. APSE had kind of a fundamental code of ethics, like 10 bullet points or 10 items. I can't even remember what they were. They wanted to review those and have a new code of ethics for the organization. And so I set upon myself to draft and put a committee in place, put a chairman in place, and we drafted this code. And then we sat down at a meeting at the convention in Boston and aired it out. Well, that didn't go very well. There was a lot of pushback, especially smaller papers who didn't want to be told they couldn't do this or couldn't do that. And we just try to remind people, these aren't your rules. Your company runs your rules. You just asked us for guidelines, and we're adapting the guidelines that were in place to better reflect the nature of the industry as it is now and the people who were involved in it. And so it was a pretty confrontational meeting, probably the most confrontational meeting that didn't involve the contest of any time I was ever in APSC. And I was frustrated by that because we were trying to do what the organization, the members had asked us to do, and we're doing it thoughtfully. Probably there was a better way to do it. I don't know. John Rawlings came in after me as president. He was the first vice president in there, and he took over the. I didn't get a code passed, but we made progress on it. And John took it over, used his reverence as he has now as a minister now. So he had reverence about him, I guess, and he took a different approach to it and was able to take the basic guidelines, tweak them a little bit, and the organization adopted them at the next meeting. So we started the ball rolling. He got it across the goal line. If you pardon my cliches, but it was quite an interesting process and eye opening, and I don't ever want to do it again.
What is APSE meant to you professionally during your career?
That's almost it was the most rewarding thing that ever happened to me in my professional career by far, because it was such an honor to be among that group of people and to be chosen to be there. I did not feel like I deserved to be in some ways. I mean, I worked at it. I wanted to be. I tried my best, but the people who were before me were just giants. I mean, Dave Smith is a fabulous human being, and Herb Stutz and Bill Dwyer and Henry Freeman and Earl Cox, who was one of the founders of the organization, was a guy I knew from college days, personal level. It just it was such a great group. It's Doria, it's Doria, George Solomon. I mean, Paul Anger. There's just so many great guys, and they all had arms, and there were no egos that dominated. And I'm not saying the egos didn't emerge sometimes; they did, but there was just such a developmental process to it, and we all just enjoyed the time we shared together. There was competitiveness, and people wanted to be who had, especially in people in the same towns. There were two paper towns in those days, and a lot of them wanted to beat each other, and we wanted to beat each other on a national level too. But it was just such a great group of camaraderie. I can't imagine a better group. I had the opportunity, I guess you'd say, a few years after I left sports, to be president of the Sunday and Feature Editors Association. Similar kind of organization involving Sunday and feature editors, and that was a great honor too. And it was a much more individualistic organization, and it didn't have the tradition and the investment. And I guess because sports editors, we all are frustrated athletes or something, and we've all been involved in sports to certain level. So we kind of had that teamwork camaraderie locker room thing. That sounds kind of mundane, but it really is true. I mean, it just was very personal, and I went on to work. I mean, I stayed involved, for five, 5 or 6 years after I was president. Uh, Even after I left sports, I would go to the meetings every now and again. I really hated missing the Las Vegas thing, but because of the personal situation, I just couldn't be there. And uh, we had a big gathering in Richmond for the 25th annual. That I loved being part of that. Somewhere I've got a video of that. Dave Barry making fun of me, but it's just a great group of people. I was in a fraternity in college, and I was kind of liking it to that, without a lot of the stupidity. We had our parties and we had our moments, but by and large, it was. And there's stories I'm sure that others can tell better than I, but it was just a great group of individuals, a family type thing, and it was wonderful.
Um, it sounds like those people meant a lot to you personally, in addition to professionally.
Yeah, I've stayed in touch with many of them. Jeff Wohler and I are good friends. Dave and Bill and Henry. When Henry won the APSE award, the Red Smith Award, he asked me to come and do his introductory speech. Yeah, we've all stayed in touch to different extents. Everybody's got their own appetite for that. But and then some of the good friends that I had in the business have passed away. Lost some people, some good people. But yeah, it's Dave Smith is, he was huge in the industry in everything that he contributed, and from the founding days of APSE. And Dave's still the same old Dave. Dropped me a note, come out to Vegas, and it just was just like we've been talking yesterday. It was the same guy, and I just hard to, that just doesn't exist anymore in so many ways in the world, much sports journalism notwithstanding.
What advice would you have for future presidents and leaders of APSE?
Listen, open your ears, listen. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, we were pretty focused, and we were a bunch of guys I say that generally, putting up print newspapers. We only had like one thing to think about, right? And might do special sections, and we might have different deadlines, and might have different emphases, but we really were all doing the same thing. Some people did it 7 days a week. Some people did it 5 days a week. Some people did it now to run anything in sports journalism is just an overwhelming enterprise, and I can't imagine how a sports editor makes the decisions that he or she has to make on a day-to-day basis about coverage and staffing and that sort of thing, because you don't have the resources we used to have. You don't have some of the problems, but you have more of the problems differently. So anyway, anybody running APSE, I think, has just got to be open to everything that's affecting everybody, because the problems in the industry, in some cases, are always going to be similar, and you want access, and you want timeliness, and you want the ability to do your best work, and to fight with organizations and the schedulers and that sort of thing to get that. And APSE usually leads those discussions. But you got to be open to every little thing that's out there. And APSE's been aggressive in recent years about expanding its membership to include a lot of different kinds. We were pretty snobby in our day, and while I look back, you had to be a newspaper, you had to be a management structure for the newspaper to be a member. We had to go through its strict qualifications to be involved. Now, it's basically there are a lot of people doing a lot of things, and you have to be open to that. And by the same token, as a president of any organization, I would think just has to be open and listen to the full-throated input of the constituency. You can't be everything to everybody, but you certainly have to understand the hard line approach that you need to take, or the high level approach you need to take to accomplish whatever goals you're setting to accomplish. I know that I was mentioning the difficulty now for sports editors making decisions based on different criteria and different appetites and demands for information. Well, you also, because of the staffing, you have to make hard decisions about what you do and don't cover, and to what extent you do and don't cover something. Los Angeles Times have just recently decided they were going to run more game stories and move the deadlines up to like 8 o'clock. So I think from an organizational point of view for APSE, you've got to understand that your organization's evolving, and you've got to make hard lines about what you can and can't do. And I think that's listening to your members, and I think those are the kind of the key things I'd tell anybody about any enterprise they were taking.
Is there anything else you want to add, or any other stories you want to tell?
Well, no. Unlike a lot of my colleagues in the APSE days, I'm still working at it. I'm still cranking out stories every day. My career's kind of gone in reverse, in the sense that I'm back to doing kind of baseline reporting for a website. But I'll tell you what, our website is the most trafficked news site in North Carolina, and my stories get read by a whole lot more people now than used to when I was writing newspapers. But it's fun, and I'm not ready to hang it up in that regard. But I do envy some of them who get to play golf more often than I do.
What website are you writing for now?
I write for WGHP Television in Greensboro. It's a Fox Entertainment Sports affiliate. It's not Fox News, but Fox Entertainment Sports. And I cover a lot of government, election, politics, legislative, kind of deep dive stuff a lot of times. Now I do trashy stuff from here and there, and I do some sports stuff here and there. I'll do something about Hallmark Christmas movies, or I might do, next week we've got the Wyndham Championship golf tournament here. I'll probably do something from that. 5 things kind of thing. Typical web content. But I do a lot of 2,000 word I talked to a lot of people around here, and I was I was the managing editor of the Greensboro paper, and that job went away, and then I became something else at that paper, and that job went away. And I worked at a couple other small papers out about 30 minutes from here, and then this opportunity came up, and I knew the news director. And a lot of people in newspapers have always looked down their noses at TV news. I can tell you that our TV newsroom is as professional as any newspaper I've been in. Not as big, not as much slices of assignments and that sort of thing. It's and more immediate, and yeah, crime and traffic and weather dominate the world, but they're very thorough, and very consistent. We have a like a 75-page ethics guide that the company has. Our company is Nexstar. It's the biggest TV company in the country. It's like they get ahead of television stations, but it's professional. And we own News Nation and KTLA and things like that. The Hill, if you've seen their report. So we do a lot. We do a lot of reporting, and it's kind of fun work. I don't know how much longer I'll do it. I'm not sure how much longer they'll have me, but I don't get paid a lot of money, but it's kind of an opportunity to have an impact still. Stay around the news. You know, that's me. I'm a news guy.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you to all the great people at who are still involved with APSC. I appreciate the stewardship you've carried forward with this issue. I watch it, I'm involved with it. They'll like it, whether it keeps me informed. I've been involved for 1,000 years, and it's great. And good luck to everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.